In the next weeks, I'll be dealing with a new topic, and that is, who am I? The topic for today is, you underestimate your influence. I received a letter from an experienced counselor in our church. He not only counsels in our church, but other churches as well. And he wrote, I would like to thank you in this way, that you refer people who have problems to me for counsel and for conversation, especially for the healing of leaders, no matter whether they're old or young, male or female. My heart burns for this. If leaders move into wholeness and healing, they will lead well. This is good for the believers in every area of all churches and strengthens the body of Christ. Indeed, from my experience as a team leader, I can confirm the saying, the fish stinks from the head. That is, a bad leader lowers the relational capacity in and thus the effectiveness of a team or family. The reverse is true, of course, that a good leader inspires both. And who you are as a person, as a leader, this influences your team. I think it's so important that we keep the role of the leader in sight, that we see how important and what a positive influence we can have on our teams, especially if we're leading a church or a team. In many circles, especially in churches, the role of the team leader is often, goes without recognition or is criticized, or it's a case of who needs a leader. But we make a mistake with this, because a good leader has an influence on his team, and that's why the task of the leader is to truly look at his heart and say, who am I? And am I a good influence on my team? When I lived in South Africa, shortly before I planted a new church, my leader had a talk with me, and he said, Wayne, I have a few very important things to say to you. He said, up to now, you've been a small fish in a large pond, but soon you're going to be a big fish in a small pond. And you will see that people start becoming like you. Who you are, what you do, they're going to imitate and follow. And that's why it's so important that you see who you are and what you're doing. They will get the illnesses that you have, not the illnesses you say you have. So leaders influence those around them, and that's why the identity of a leader is so important. In the Bible, we see a hero, David, and many of us who are Christians know about this man. And David had a bad influence as well, but he also had a positive influence. I'm going to start with the positive influence. We see he killed a giant, Goliath. And this was a very courageous act that he did. He got a lot of recognition for this, especially from those that were following him. And the Bible tells us in many other parts, it says that there were other people that killed giants. And what is very interesting is every other instance mentioned about giants being killed, they were the men of David. They were his men who killed these giants, and that was the influence of David. They were saying, that's our business. We've seen what our leader has done, and that's what we're about. We kill giants. We know that David also had a bad side, a weak side, and he had committed adultery with a woman. He had a problem with women in his life, and we see that this was passed on to his son Solomon. And when we read the Bible, we see that even Solomon had 300 concubines and 700 wives, and he had a love for foreign women. And we know that God had said, you do not take these women. But the influence of David in his life was so strong that he couldn't resist it. And we see that David's problem became an even bigger problem in his life. Bad influence. Paul recognized the influence, the power of influence in a leader. And we see in 1 Corinthians 4 verse 7, he says, "Therefore, I exhort you, follow my example." So, some questions for you to apply. Firstly, think of examples where the dynamics I have described here are found in your experience. Write these down. Secondly, in which ways do you recognize the influence you have amongst people you lead? And thirdly, what would you or your team need to change in order to say, "Imitate me"? Who am I? Don't underestimate your influence.